Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another Data Center Hawk podcast, a Hawk Talk. I am David Sandars, Regional Director for EMEA for Data Center Hawk, and I am joined today by Konstantin Hartmann, who is the Managing Director in EMEA for NTT Global Data Centers. And I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion to learn way more about not just the data center operations of NTT in EMEA, but globally, and expanding my knowledge of your business, Konstantin, and hopefully people tuning in will be doing the same. Would you like to start off by giving a brief introduction to yourself and your background in the industry?
Yeah, I would love to do that. So, hey David, first of all, and thanks for having me. I like actually the name of the podcast, Hawk Talk. I think that's a great name. And by the way, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Data Center Hawk is a great partner for us as NTT, and you and David in the US, really great team. Really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and really also appreciate how you really educating not only the industry, but you're educating the whole world about what data centers are all about. That's just great work, and that's great that you guys are doing this. So, well, thanks for having me on your podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for those kind words.
Thanks. So it's just a quick intro to my side. So my name, as you said, Konstantin Hartmann. I'm the Managing Director of NTT Global Data Centers in the EMEA region. I'm in the industry for almost a decade now. So I joined a company called eShelter, which was a data center operator in Central Europe in the beginning of 2017. And then a couple months later, actually, NTT acquired that data center operator, eShelter. And since then, I stayed with NTT, and we have a wonderful development path over the last 8-9 years around our data centers and our data center footprint in EMEA. So in my role, my key responsibility is the growth in the region. So I'm responsible for all our client engagements that we are doing. So speaking with clients that are new clients for us, speaking with clients that are existing clients, and growing with these clients and providing services to them from the start to the end. And also at the same time supporting our development teams in finding new land, finding new power, and actually growing our footprint in EMEA.
I see, and so NTT entered the market through acquisition, and for those who don't know, NTT is a global telecoms organization,
Right.
and prior to that, had the business have any other sort of data center focused operations anywhere in the world?
Oh yeah, we do. And let me maybe frame the picture a little bit about NTT, because I think sometimes a little bit confusing, because some of the folks that are listening to this podcast probably think when they hear about NTT about the telecom provider, the IT services provider, but not so much about data centers. And I think that makes us really special as NTT Global Data Centers, that we are part of a bigger company. We are part of NTT Data, and NTT Data is one of the largest ICT companies in the world, so providing IT services across the value chain through different partners, through different enterprises. And not many people know that, but NTT Data has more than 350,000 people working for that company. By the way, only 3,500, so 1%, are actually working in the data center part, or data center division. And I'm glad to be one of them. And so we are the data center part of the NTT Data organization, then called NTT Global Data Centers, and really have been established, as you said, through acquisition. So what NTT did really, really well, and that started all beginning of 2000 and moved forward until 2017, 2018, that NTT, instead of being only a telecom provider, realized really early around that there is a huge IT service need in the future, and that is actually where NTT wanted to invest. And what NTT did then at the time is they actually acquired a couple of data center operators across the globe. So they acquired Raging Wire in the US, they acquired Gyron in the UK, eShelter in Central Europe, NetMagic in India, and at the same time also developed their own data centers across the APAC region and obviously in Japan. So due to these acquisitions and that growth of the company, NTT Global Data Centers is now the third largest provider in the world.
Well, that's quite impressive, and as you say, in a relatively short period of time since deciding to enter the market as well. And since those early days, since entering new markets for NTT, i.e. Europe and North America, as you explained there, through acquisition, the strategy now is to build your own facilities. Is that correct?
That's right. So we provide the end-to-end value chain of a data center developer. So we are acquiring land. We look for land and power. We then design our own data centers. We construct our own data centers, and we operate our own data centers and provide them as co-location facilities to all type of clients. So starting from retail and enterprise clients up to major hyperscalers around the globe.
Okay, and can you give us a kind of idea of the scale? You said you're the third largest. Do you know how many facilities you have globally? What kind of number of megawatts you have under management, as it were? Give us a sample of that.
Happy to do that. So at the moment, we have more than 150 data centers in operations across the globe. If we look at EMEA specifically, we do have 400 megawatts in operation, and we're going to double the number in the next couple of years. So every year, we as NTT Global Data Centers currently are investing more than $3 billion into our data centers, into new data centers that we are developing across the globe in Americas, in EMEA, and in APAC.
Yeah, some impressive numbers there. As most people in our industry will appreciate, it's a capital intensive business developing data centers, and the scale is just getting bigger and bigger. So acquiring the land, obtaining the power supply, and then putting the buildings in place to support customers is not cheap. So, but that's an impressive level of investment from the business to continue growing the data center business across the globe. What are the key markets for you currently in EMEA? If we can just kind of focus in on the EMEA business, what are the key locations for you?
Yeah, happy to talk about this. So. Looking back on where we started, as I said, we were two operators in the EMEA region, Gyron in the UK, eShelter in Central Europe, and then naturally Frankfurt and London have been the key markets from that time and are still the key markets for us today. So we have been growing across Frankfurt, across London, but we cover all the tier one markets in EMEA, so also in Paris and Amsterdam. In all of the four markets, we are about to deliver capacity or developing capacity at the moment, and handing over spaces on a regular basis to our clients. So tier one markets is kind of our bread and butter business, and we are a strong believer that these markets are going to grow in the future. But besides that, we also have been selective in other tier two markets where we actually see also in high demand. We are the largest provider, according to my information, from a capacity perspective in Germany, for example. So Berlin as a tier 2 market is super exciting for us. We are developing in Berlin. We have in Berlin already 2 campuses live. We're going to continue to grow there. But we also invested into Madrid. We are investing into Milan. So we're going to open up our first facility in Milan in the next couple of years. And we're looking into markets like Joburg. So we have a facility in Africa, in Joburg, that is already in operations, and also continue to grow in markets like Vienna and Zurich, where we have facilities available and in operation.
I see. And how about, say, the Nordic region in Europe? Have you considered that region from a development perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we always monitor the Nordic region quite closely, and we'll look if there is a possibility for us to invest into it. So far, we haven't made that decision because we were highly focused on our existing markets, on the flat markets, the tier one markets, the tier two markets that I just mentioned, is because we do see the growth there. We see that importance for our clients when we speak to them. And that's not only hyperscalers. These are enterprise clients, these are retail clients, these are public clients. They all understand and they all see the necessity to actually be close to these network pops, close to these ecosystems that or data center ecosystems that we already have established in these markets. So we strongly believe that these markets are going to continue to grow. Besides the challenges that we have around power and finding the right land, etc., is that a Frankfurt market, and I always like to compare that, which was a couple of years ago, everything around 2 or 3 miles or 4 or 5 kilometers around the city center. The Frankfurt data center has now a radius around the city center of 50 kilometers sometimes. So the market just becomes bigger and bigger. And we have, for example, one huge campus that we are developing, one of the largest in Europe, outside of Frankfurt. It's a little bit further out from Frankfurt, which has a total capacity of almost 500 megawatts. And we're planning to go live there by 2029.
Well, I mean, again, another really big and really impressive number, and I was smiling gently to myself because from what we do in terms of monitoring how markets are evolving and developing and growing, they're not just more capacity coming into markets, but like you say, geographical kind of crawl or creep, if you like. As Frankfurt, London, Paris, they get bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of boundaries from a data center perspective. So yeah, that made me chuckle. But amazing statistic there, 500 megawatt facility. You put that into context for us. What sort of capacity was the e-shelter data center business when NTT first kind of entered the market in Europe?
Yeah, I remember when I joined the company, we were building data centers in the range of 5 to 10 megawatts. And in some markets, we still do that.
Yeah.
But in most markets, we just saw that scale has just grown so fast, and we just have to scale up our data centers as well. And that's why we now see that our data centers are more in the range of 30, 40 megawatts per building. And we are seeing that this demand is there also in the key markets around Europe. And just besides that demand in that key markets, I mean, I remember when joining the industry, there was a lot of talk about edge data centers, and there's probably a use case for edge data centers, and there's probably also a use case for AI data centers that are somewhere in the middle of nowhere for training models. But what we see when we talk about Europe and the European market is that most of the capacity and most of the demand, when we're speaking to our clients, is really concentrating on the tier 1 and tier 2 markets.
Sure. So in Europe in particular, tier 2 markets are kind of very, very basically kind of the Nordic region, the north of Europe, and also the sort of southern region, through Lisbon, Spain, Italy, through to Athens, and maybe kind of hooking round to Eastern Europe as well. But you're still seeing really strong demand in those traditional strong what we reference as tier 1 markets through Europe, which is great to hear.
Yeah, and we see it on a totally different scale now in comparison to the years before, and which also means, and you talked about it, it's such a capital heavy business now. When you building 30 megawatt facility, 40 megawatt facilities, it's just a lot more investment that you have to do, and therefore we also need to be clear on where do we want to invest. I mean, the good thing is we have deep pockets through our own entity holding structure, and I said NTT is investing $3 billion every year into the data center portfolio, which is just huge. But nevertheless, we also working together with JV partners. We just went live with our Singapore REIT the other day. So we're also looking about other ways in order to recycle capital and actually then reinvest it again into our platform.
Yeah, impressive stuff, and again, like really serious numbers on an annual basis as well. The other thing that's kind of interest to me is not just the sort of scale of these buildings that and how that's changed from the last decade to 15 to 20 years and things like that, but also the density that customers are now demanding, and what have you seen over the last sort of 10 years in terms of what companies, enterprise, hyperscale, and others have said to you in terms of this is how much power we need in the cabinet, and where do you see it going in the future, and how are you preparing for that?
That's a great question, and I think it's interesting to look back on where we started when we designed data centers. We were anticipating, and actually at the time this was correct, is that we have rack densities or cabinet densities of 3 kilowatt, 4 kilowatt per rack, sometimes 5 kilowatt per rack. So that was kind of the average that we were seeing, and the more we went along that path, the higher the densities have became with these cabinets. And we are now at the point in the development of high density cabinets where also the data centers need to rethink about what's the right design. And then we speak about things like liquid cooling, immersion cooling, etc., etc. But what we see at the moment is that even though everybody anticipated that all data centers as of 2026, 2027 will only be liquid cooled for AI applications and cloud compute and enterprise demands, what we see, I think the industry is not there yet. I think we will see liquid cooling requirements at some point in the future. But I think because also of the efficiency of our air-cooled systems, that air cooling can actually handle higher densities than we sometimes think ourselves that what is and isn't capable. So liquid cooling will be the future for sure. The question is, when is going to be the pivot point, and are we at that pivot point already this year, or is the pivot point going to happen in a couple of years from now?
Okay, that's really interesting, and especially kind of maintaining the focus on air cooling and using different technologies to deliver higher density cabinets via air cooling. That's really interesting. In terms of preparing for liquid cooling and the various different technologies that are going to enter the marketplace in that area, how is NTT from an engineering perspective evaluating that new technology?
So all of our future builds that we're doing, we actually build in a liquid enabled function. So they're air cooled on a basis, and then we can change on a data hole by data hole basis to actually then work on liquid cooling requirements if that is needed by the client. What we're seeing at the moment, and that's the great thing about working across the portfolio and actually also seeing what our colleagues are doing in APAC and Americas, is we have more than 200 megawatts of capacity live with liquid cooling in the US, and we had a huge learning curve there around how to operate such a facility and how to best set it up in order to be flexible with our clients. So to answer your question is, our facilities are liquid enabled, but it all comes down to the actual needs of the client, and we need to look into the details then about, do we really require it? And we have these open discussions with our clients, or is it actually more reasonable and maybe also commercially more reasonable to stay with an air-cooled solution?
Sure. So a very kind of collaborative approach to the engineering design and the principles behind how the workloads are going to be cooled and supported.
That's right. Yeah. So it's looking exactly into that, and we have to, and all, I think, and I can speak there probably for all our partners and other providers in the market, is you have to, in times like this, stay flexible. And as a data center operator, that's sometimes not that easy, because you're investing a lot of capital really, really early, and you have your designs and you have construction periods, etc., etc. So to have a good outlook is key, but at the same time, we have to stay flexible to see where demands and densities are going.
Sure, and I bet there's been an awful lot of lessons learned from that experience as well. I mean, DLC, direct liquid cooling, is a relatively new technology, and so working in collaboration with your clients to install it and to determine how it should be operated would be very informative and educational, I'd imagine.
100%, 100%. And actually, it does. If you do a liquid to chip cooling installation, it does not only impact your cooling infrastructure. It also impacts the way, for example, you do your security services, because there comes a point of maintaining that infrastructure, and also some of the infrastructure is actually installed in the data halls of our clients. So we need to be closely aligned how we can get access and maintain the pipe infrastructure, for example. And so there are more discussions that need to be had if you do a liquid cooling installation.
I can imagine, especially with it being such a young and new technology, and everybody's kind of learning as we go. So there's no great period of let's just create a test lab and run it for 2 or 3 years and see what we can learn from that. We've got to go. Everyone's jumping straight in and moving forward. With a relatively new and complex technology.
Yeah, 100%. But what I see at the moment in the market is that probably the most or many of the liquid cooling solutions that are going to be implemented at the moment will be focused on the US. Yeah. And the US market will be a little bit the guinea pig for all of these solutions to be figured out how to run them in the best way. Mm-hmm. And I assume that EMEA and APAC will follow a couple of years later after we have received sufficient learnings out of the Americas.
That's a really interesting point, and it's not just the data center industry, but many other industries have kind of looked to the US to see what's happening there right now, because that potentially where we're going to be in 2 or 3 years' time, and what can we learn from colleagues over in the US who are living it in the present day, and how can we use that to prepare for what might be coming down the line. And of course,
correct. That's 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, with your established business, your operations over there in the States, you're very well positioned to benefit from that knowledge that your colleagues are accumulating there at the moment.
Yeah, and that's also the great thing. And I haven't touched on this in the beginning when we talked about NTT, but actually, NTT Global Data Centers has been a couple of years ago, or just 2 years ago, we have been 4 different regions, and we worked more or less in isolation. So everybody had their own operations team, everybody had their own construction design teams, their go-to-market strategy. And what we started 2 years ago is an initiative which we are calling One GDC, so One Global Data Center Company. And what we're doing is really to bring now all these functions together and working across regional limitations and boundaries in order to speak with each other and to align what is going on, how can we actually learn from each other, and how can we actually in the best way drive the future solutions forward.
Sure, I mean that just seems like a really sensible approach to take, and that sharing of knowledge either in-house or across industry, and knowledge and experience and what people have learned about trying to solve the same problems. It just strikes me as the only way an organisation can benefit from that combined knowledge. Do you have examples of perhaps where Europe is ahead of the North American market, and has sort of led the way and explained how things could be done perhaps differently or improved in North America, and from lessons learnt in Europe? And one area, by way of example, that we often hear about where Europe is perhaps leading North America is in energy efficiency and sustainability.
That's right. Yeah, and I can 100% agree with that. I would have covered exactly the point around sustainability, and what we are doing in Europe, and that is partly because of the regulation that we're seeing in Europe with the EED, with regulation like the energy efficiency law in Germany. So there are a couple of regulations that actually also impact the way that we are operating data centers in Europe. But also we have started our own initiatives and our own targets, how we become a better from a sustainability perspective. And one thing is obviously from our perspective is we want to be close to 100% net zero on our scope 1 and 2 emissions when it comes to our data centers. That means specifically a huge portion of our emissions, if you're a data center operator, is related to the source of power. And that's why we are investing heavily into renewable powers through PPAs, through direct investments, in order to support not only our business, but also support the regional, the national grids to become greener faster over time. So actually we can source more green power to our data centers and actually help that whole revolution going away from gray power into green power throughout the next year. So energy, really the supply of our power is a key thing for us. And when it comes to energy efficiencies, there's different measures that we are doing in order to look into how can we actually reduce every kilowatt hour that we need to run our data center system. So everything that is kind of bundled up under our PUEs to see what can we do to get our PUEs down, how can we actually invest into making this more efficient. And then there are other projects, and we have a super interesting one at the moment in Berlin, where we have a huge heat recovery project, where we're capable to get heat out of the data centers into a new area which is currently being developed, where at some point more than 10,000 people will live and actually use the heat in order to take showers, to heat their apartments, etc. And I like these projects because if you think about it, it actually means you're using every kilowatt hour twice. So you use it for our digital services, we use it for all the apps that are on our smartphones in order to be processed in the data centers, and then we use that same kilowatt hour again for a warm shower.
Absolutely, the recycling model and reuse model in action and making a real benefit to local communities. I'm interested to find out a little bit more about that specific project in Berlin. Was the heat reuse network, was it already in place, or was that something that NTT are putting in place or had put in place as part of the data center development?
So as part of our design, we have reflected to hand over that heat to a local grid operator. So we already did this right in the beginning when we designed the data center years ago. Mm-hmm. And then we came into discussions with the different grid operators in that market that are running different heating grids. And we found a partner with who we developed together then a solution where we can actually on our campus hand over the heat, which is in a range of 26, 27 degrees Celsius. Yeah. And actually then the heating grid operator is going to transport this then to the new area that's currently being developed for residential living. Mm-hmm. And then using different systems in order to get the heat up to actually the Celsius that are needed in order to heat up homes and to warm up showers.
Very good, very good. And nice little kind of introduction into my next area of questioning, which is kind of what other kind of community engagement programs are NTT Global Data Centers involved with?
That's a great question, and it's interesting because I remember when I joined, I remember there was an article in a local newspaper. And it always talked about the silent giant when they were talking about NTT Global Data Centers at the time, because we were at an early stage of our company and we were concentrating so much around developing the company, building up the capabilities, building up the operational expertise, etc. So, and we didn't really invest enough time into our community engagement, and that has dramatically changed throughout the last years, and it's one of the key areas that I also look after personally. Is when we are now developing new campuses, we actually are being engaged with the community right from the start. So we're closely aligned with the municipalities, with the mayors of the applicable areas, and specifically we are inviting the communities to a dialogue, to present our plans, even at an early stage. And sometimes we don't know how a campus is going to develop in 5, 6, 10 years from now. But at least we show them where we are in our planning process at the moment. And how it helps that really the community is accepting and also seeing the benefits of having the data center operator as their neighbor. So it's pretty impressive about how we're capable through that community engagement to change also the views of people and take away the fear that many people have around data centers and the data center development industry.
It's great to hear, and it's great to hear that you're getting such a positive kind of reaction to engaging with the community. Aside from kind of presentations and talks with the local community, do you engage in any other activities, so open days or site visits for people from the local communities?
Yeah, we do that. So there's a great initiative by the German Data Center Association, for example, which is the Open Data Center Days. Mm-hmm. And there we actually see that we are opening up some of our data centers, for example, in Berlin, in Frankfurt, in Munich, mm-hmm. and actually inviting the local community to join us and to have a look behind the scenes and see what are we doing there, how we're running our data centers, and how important these data centers are for digital infrastructure. And sometimes it's always fascinating for me when I get into these conversations with our neighbors is sometimes people don't realize about that when they're using all these apps on their smartphone is that the processing of these apps is not happening on their device. It actually happens in a data center. And once you explain that connection and how digitalization impacts all part of our daily living, we can see immediately that there's an increased acceptance of why these data centers are required and why also these data centers from a data sovereignty perspective are ideally located in the region.
Absolutely. I mean, one way to make people realise what they do is to turn it all off and see what happens. Not suggesting that's a really good way to do it, but yeah, we have to kind of educate people in a different manner. Really great to see, and great to see that a large global organisation like NTT is taking time to engage with local communities and talk to them and explain what it is that goes on in these often fairly anonymous but very large scale buildings on the outskirts of town and that kind of thing. And of course, harking back to the point about heat reuse and things like that they're actually providing a benefit to the local community as well as the global digital infrastructure community as well.
That's right, and what we also do is, and what we started a couple of years ago, is that we have apprenticeships programs and training programs for young students to actually join us right at the beginning of their career. And it's fascinating because I visit a lot of our sites and I get into conversations with these new joiners, and they have just great ideas. They think outside the box. They have a totally different view of the world. And they give us good insight about how we as a company can change. And investing into these colleagues has been really a key for us for successfully building up a lot of expertise in the different regions. So we're really proud about these programs, and we are keen to get as many young people on board as we can in order to support the business to grow.
Yeah, it's brilliant to hear, and it's great to get young people involved and educated, and not just learning about what data centers are, but actually working in them as well in any kind of way, shape, or form. And I know it's not easy to recruit apprentices and to go through that process to convince an organisation that it's a good route to follow and a good path to take. So again, it's great to see that a large global organisation like NTT is trying to invest in young people and bring them into our industry. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's the key source of success for us. We always talk about internally in our executive meetings, and we always come to the point that people are the key for our success. It is, yes, we have huge data centers. Yes, we have to spend a lot of money on them, but we need to have the right people to run these data centers and actually help us to develop further and come up with the ideas of the future. So we're having several initiatives also internally where we try for innovation, where we want to hear these ideas about what's coming next, because we don't know all. So we want to hear from these young people. We want to hear from people that just join us about how can we actually make a difference, how can we develop further, and how can they be part of that.
Sure, it'd be interesting to sit down and go into the detail of what kind of interesting and creative and diverse ways of thinking and the different demographic provides and the younger generation provide in terms of a approach to data center operations and management and construction as well. A conversation for another time, maybe. I just want to wrap up, Konstantin, by saying look, we've covered so many different areas today, and it's been really, really interesting. But in respect to NTT's global data center business in EMEA, where do you see the future? Where do you think what shape do you think the business will be in 10 years' time?
So what I see with NTT is that we are going to continue to invest into digital infrastructure on a large scale. And we're going to continue to serve different client needs. And as I said, starting from smaller retail clients who just have a single cabinet and who just have the need for that, but also serving large wholesale and hyperscale clients around the globe. And really working with these clients together to be a platform that they can work together with globally and actually give that scale. I'm super proud about us being the backbone of digitalization and what we can give in order to drive everything that's in front of us in a digital world and make, hopefully through our data centers, also the world a better place.
That's great to hear, and from our side of things, we look forward to following that evolution and that journey that NTT are well embarked on already. So it's going to be a fascinating time, the future in our industry, that's for sure. Konstantin, all that remains for me to do is to say thank you very much indeed for giving me your time today to go through this really enlightening and interesting conversation. And I hope everybody tuning in and watching has found it equally so.
Yeah, I hope so too. And David, thanks for the time. It was great speaking to you as always, and always good to catch up. And yeah, on the datacenterHawk side, please continue your work. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, see you soon, I hope, Konstantin.